We're preparing for Duke football's next game on Friday against NC State coming up this weekend. Should be a fun one between the Blue Devils and the Wolfpack. Who's going to be playing quarterback on Saturday for Duke? We'll talk about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with JJ Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on this Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. Excited to talk about everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow us on wherever you get your podcast feeds. Listen to the show each and every day. Follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. And, of course, subscribe to our YouTube page. Joining me on today's show, excited to bring on my good friend Conor O'Neill from our friends over at Devils Illustrated. You can follow him on Twitter at ConorO'Neill_DI. Conor, the time is always greatly appreciated. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing all right. We're in the full swing of things, man. We had a Duke basketball media day like a week and a half ago. Still have a bunch of story ideas percolating and still feel like I can't get to them because football's halfway through the season. So
no kidding. We're here. We are talking about, a fun football season and basketball slowly approaching on the horizon. Love talking basketball, of course, but when Duke's off to such a great football season so far, I know that's been a lot of the conversation so far. A bye week this past week for Duke. You look at what Duke was able to do through those first 5 games of the season. I think at the start of the year, if you would have told any Duke fan out there, heck, any player, coach in that program, I think everyone would be pretty satisfied with the 4-1 start.
Yeah, not to beat my own drum here, but I did have a story back in like July or early August that said one of the optimistic predictions for Duke would be they went 4-1 in September. And the Duke fans looked at that and were like, "Oh man, that'd be great." It's like, yeah, I do think you get one of Clemson and Notre Dame. I didn't think they would get both, and hell, they were a 4th and 16 away from getting both. So I guess I was either really lucky or really unlucky, depending on where you look at that. But yeah, 4-1, getting into the rankings where they did. Putting themselves on the map with the game day host, like everything about September, even though they didn't close it out with a win, was about as positive as it could have been, I think.
And then a bye week comes into play, just 5 games into the season for the Duke team. Some time to, I guess, look in the mirror, reflect a little bit, recover for some injuries that take place. And again, we'll get to Riley Leonard here in just a little bit, but just a bye week at this portion of the season. What did it mean for this Duke football team specifically?
It came at a great point. Obviously it came at a great point because of Riley Leonard's ankle. Also, it's something that I'd kind of never really thought about. Every coach I'd ever heard talked about, they wanted that bye week to land right in the middle of their season, like 6 games, off week, 6 games works out. And actually, from talking to Coach Elko last year, when their bye week was so late in the year, if you remember, Duke played 8 games and then got their off week and then launched into the 4-game November that they had. It actually benefits a team more to have the off week after 4 or 5 games. And we're splitting hairs. There's not much of a difference. But when you think about a team goes through an entire August and then jumps into the season and has 4 or 5 games, that's where you want the break. You don't want to play the entire fall camp through August, then play half your schedule, because you're playing more than half of your season when you think about how much fall camp matters for development and the wear and tear and bodies that go into an entire month of practices. So an off week coming 5 games into a season is a lot better than an off week coming 8 games into the season like it was last year.
No, super excited to see the Duke team come out of this off week, 5 games into the year, and see if they can kind of spark that momentum that they had through those first 5 games of the season, playing the contrast to what they had just a year ago. As we look at the quarterback situation now, obviously everyone concerned about the well-being of Riley Leonard. Many people, myself included, I'm sure you were in the boat as well. You immediately go to the most negative, most serious things kind of in that moment, worrying about what the injury could be for Riley Leonard. Where do we stand here today on Wednesday, knowing a game's coming up this weekend for Duke? I mean, where is Riley Leonard at in all of this, Connor?
As we heard from Mike, he's day-to-day. He's progressed really well. Last week was basically all about recovery. There was no, okay, let's try to get him out there and have him stationary throw to Jalen Calhoun or anything like that. It was just all in the training room, medical people. That's what was needed. And when you think about the last time we saw him was getting his leg bent in the wrong direction and writhing around on the ground, getting carried off the field and then crutching himself into the tunnel shortly after the game against Notre Dame. I mean, I kind of think it's a positive just that he's at the point where Mike Elko can say on a Monday, he's day-to-day and progressing and, we'll see. Because there's a lot of other scenarios where he comes out and says, well, maybe we'll have him back in November. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to be watching pregame warmups on Saturday night. I think that's really the definitive time that we'll know something. I don't think I'll be curious if we get the Pete Thamel drop on game day on Saturday mornings. That always drives me crazy, but that's another conversation. I want to see how he moves around in warmups. I want to see because movement is such a big deal for Riley. He's not a stationary quarterback. We know that watching him for a year and a half. Running is a huge part of his game. So he's got to be able to move. And this is also going to be a matter of the coaching staff needs to make the best decision in the interest of its player. Because Riley is such a competitor that he's going to try to be out there if he has legs attached to his body and feet attached to those legs. Like he's the type of kid that's going to play through some stuff and probably try to hide some pain from the staff. And so that's where the evaluation comes in of really you have to know your player. And that's nothing that I can pick up in pregame warmups. That's what I can pick up, watching how he moves, that kind of thing. So we'll see. I don't think he plays. I just, maybe it's the lasting imagery of the Notre Dame game. Like
that's where I'm at. Like in the best way possible. The fact that this is a conversation that we're having is kind of wild to me, considering what we last saw. I mean, and the whole idea that, oh yeah, great. It's not season ending. It's not a 6 to 8 week injury, but he's definitely going to miss a game or two. And now here we are having that day-to-day conversation and like, yeah, we'll see what warmups looks like. Wow. Yeah. I don't think many people thought we'd be here.
No, and this, like, aside from them coming out and saying there's been a miracle and he's healed and he's 100%, this is the best case scenario. And I don't know how likely that other one would have been. So yeah, it's hard for me to shake the imagery of him being so hurt after the Notre Dame game and to fast forward that 2 weeks and think he's going to be out there running around with the same kind of effectiveness and they're going to feel good about putting him out there against a decent NC State defense. It's not like they're, playing a team that's been giving up 38 points a game. This is a NC State defense that's really been one of the good units in the ACC for several years. So I don't know. I can't see it, but if I see it, I'm not going to be completely shocked. It's not going to it's not going to make me reevaluate what timeline I'm living, like that kind of thing. I mean, he's a competitive kid, and if he puts in the time in the medical facility and he gets his ankle to a point where he can play, yeah. That surprised me, but it wouldn't shock me. I'll put it that way.
Let's keep talking about this Duke football team exiting the bye week, Riley Leonard, whether or not he will play, and more. And we'll do that after our first time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Jace Medical. I want to tell you about the Jace case that provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is to fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions. Doctor created, doctor recommended. Go ahead and check out Jace case again. Get $20 off on these life-saving antibiotics today from Jace Medical by using my code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Jace Medical, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson alongside my pal Conor O'Neill. So we get set for Saturday, Duke and NC State. I want to shift to the Wolfpack. What are we expecting out of NC State this upcoming weekend?
New quarterback. You got to start there. They just had a quarterback change. So my lead that was written going into the Notre Dame game that Duke would be facing 2 quarterbacks that it beat last year, but we're in new positions with new teams. Well, that was half right because Sam Hartman started for Notre Dame, the former Wake quarterback, but Brennan Armstrong, the former Virginia quarterback, is no longer NC State's quarterback. They went to MJ Morris, who, if I'm being honest, it's really easy for me to say now. I didn't really understand why they brought in Brennan Armstrong, because when I saw MJ Morris last year, he looked like a really good quarterback. They didn't play Duke. These teams haven't played since 2020. They haven't played in Durham since 2013, known as the Devon Edwards game. But I saw MJ Morris have 3 touchdowns against Wake Forest in an electric Saturday night atmosphere in Carter Finley. And then he got hurt and missed the last bit of the season there. But he's a dynamic player. He throws a nice ball. He had 3 early interceptions against Marshall, and that's where Duke will kind of hone in on what he did wrong on those plays and try to repeat them. He's a dual threat. Brennan Armstrong had basically turned into a single threat, and that threat was not throwing the ball. It was running. He was a power runner. I think there was even a goal line package for him still in the playbook there against Marshall where he came in to be a power runner at the goal line to try to save some wear and tear on MJ Morris. He's not the most put together quarterback. That'll come in time. But you're talking about a team. I think NC State had gone something like 15 or 18 games without scoring over 30 points in regulation, and they score 48 when they make the quarterback change. So that tells you off the bat, this is an offense that's kind of gotten a bolt of lightning, a little juice in their sails to kind of accelerate things. It'll be a tougher task for Duke's defense than I thought it would have been 2 weeks ago before the quarterback change. Like I would have had this game as a game that Duke's defense really could have dominated if Brennan Armstrong was NC State's quarterback. Now with the change in MJ Morris, I'm not sure that's the case. I think this is more of a back and forth type of game.
You take a look at last week's game for NC State against Marshall, and as we kind of turn to the defensive side of the football, Marshall puts 41 up on the board against NC State. You look at the Duke defense as a whole, they've given up 56 total points in 5 games. Pretty impressive what that unit has done for the Blue Devils. Defensively, I guess it's going to come down in a lot of ways, Conor, to the quarterback spot for Duke and what exactly their offense can kind of look like. But is there, I don't know, any level of optimism given kind of the numbers that you've seen from that NC State defense so far, if you are a Duke fan and you're kind of looking at these things?
Yeah, I do think the 41 number is a little misleading. I think two of those touchdowns either came as on pick sixes or like with really short fields set up by interceptions. So, you see 41 and your eyes light up if you're a Duke offense. But then when you dive into the tape, I don't think that's quite the case. But You're right. I mean, I do think both defenses in this game are the better units when compared to their own offenses. With Duke's offense going against NC State's defense, what I look at is Duke wants to run the ball. I mean, no matter who the quarterback is for Duke, they're going to run the ball. We saw that in the first 5 games. Even, against Notre Dame, the big national powerhouse program that Notre Dame is.
Yeah.
Duke's offense in the second half moved the ball on the ground. Like, they weren't throwing the ball all over the place to get yards. They were ripping off 7-8 yard runs, and that's how Duke's offense functions. They have a potential first round pick at quarterback, and they're still running the ball because that's what they want to do. So NC State's defense does not give up many rushing yards. I think in the first game they gave up 160 to UConn. In the second game, I think it was 170 to Notre Dame, and 80 of that came on one Audric Estime run, which Duke just saw how good that guy is.
No kidding.
Yeah, I don't think you could pay me enough money to try to tackle him one-on-one. He's 5'11", 227, and runs violently. But since those first 2 games, I think NC State's averaged giving up about 70 to 80 yards on the ground per game. This is where I put my former Atlantic Division knowledge to use, covering Wake Forest in the Atlantic Division of the ACC for the last 6 years. Nobody runs the ball well on NC State. Even when Clemson was winning national championships, they struggled to get the run game going against NC State. It has everything to do with the scheme that NC State plays. It's what's called an Okie front. It's a 3-man front where everything about it is they're going to shoot gaps on you and create penetration. And then linebacker for NC State has been one of the strongest position groups in the ACC for the last few years. And they lost Drake Thomas and Isaiah Moore. They still have Peyton Wilson, and Peyton Wilson's playing as well as any linebacker in the ACC right now.
Sure.
Maybe any linebacker in the country. I think leads the conference in tackles. He's got at least 1 interception that he had against UConn. He's a 6th-year senior. He's a grown man, and he looks it playing in the middle of that defense. So where I'm really dialed in, and where I think is going to tell the story of this game, is not whether Riley Leonard plays or not. It's whether whoever plays quarterback for Duke is handing off the ball, and if Duke's running backs have running lanes or if there's push. That's where I think this game is won or lost.
Well, we'll continue to talk about this game for Duke, what they can do to be successful, also the atmosphere that we're walking into Saturday after our final time out here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. We say it all the time, but these days, every new potential hire is such a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience, so you can quickly prioritize just who you would like to interview and hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find your qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Final few moments here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils alongside Conor O'Neill. I'm JJ Jackson. Conor, if you will, promote your work. Where can Duke find your Duke football and Duke basketball coverage?
Yeah, it's Duke.Rivals.com. We've got a lot of good stuff up there. We're going to be interlocking and intermingling with basketball and football content for the next few months. We'll have some stuff up with a Q&A with the fellow Rivals publisher of the NC State site. Give a lot of good insight on the Wolfpack. We'll have, I think I want to write a column just about what it takes for Duke to win games and why it's the right formula to use in college football in 2023. We'll have some great preview content going into Saturday night's game.
I can't wait. It's going to be a whole lot of fun to see this game unfold. And of course, we'll be checking out all that content of yours at DukeRALcom. So you talk about Saturday night, right? The last time we saw Duke play under the lights on Saturday night, what a phenomenal atmosphere it was against Notre Dame. College game day was there. Just this massive day, kind of celebrating Duke football for the first time on that big of a stage. What does the aftermath of that look like? You're not reaching college game day levels, but it feels as though that's still important to kind of carry this out. There are home games left to be played for Duke. There's ACC titles to go after and chase. What kind of environment would you expect NC State is walking into?
Yeah, I mean, if you could look into a crystal ball and tell me, I would love it. I really don't know. That's kind of the crazy thing. It's fall break, which is not ideal.
Yeah.
I mean, especially when you have a student body that comes a lot from out of state. They want to go home. They want to go visit other places on fall break. They don't want to necessarily stick around for 4 or 5 days just so they can go to one football game and party on a Saturday night. So,
sure.
Man, it's going to be interesting. It's a game that Duke needs a home field environment, and the problem there is NC State. It's 25 miles away. Like, it's not hard for NC State people to get to Durham, obviously. So it kind of runs the risk of this could be a home game for Duke that, if you look in certain portions of the stadium, looks like a road game.
Sure.
Colors like red and orange and green have a tendency to take over some
jump out a little bit. Yeah.
There. Yeah. So it's really important for Duke fans to get there. I don't know what you can do about the students being on fall break. It's not like you can reinvent the academic calendar in 4 days, but hey man, this is a game that Duke needs a home field environment. And that's what Mike Elko has been talking about. And it's really, when you think about it, this is the last, it's a home game before Duke jumps into a stretch of 4 out of 5 weeks that they're going to be on the road. And the only home game they have in there is a Thursday night against Wake. It's not even a traditional Saturday game that they have, the one home game in this stretch. So you're talking about a team that needs to go to places like probably the other 3 best teams in the ACC at this point.
Right.
Florida State, Carolina, and Louisville. This is kind of when you start thinking about what's next. We can do that. The team can't, but we're not in trouble if we look ahead a little bit. This is a game that Duke kind of has to win if they're thinking about getting to Charlotte at the end of the year. If they're thinking about being atop the ACC, this is one they need. And so you think about this being a home game that you need a home field environment and a home field advantage.
We'll be obviously seeing what plays out with this Duke game against NC State, see how the crowd turns out. Hopefully it's a whole lot of blue there inside Wallace Wade Stadium, and we can't see too much red, although to your point, Riley, not too far away, so I'm sure some red will sneak into the building, so it should create a fun atmosphere there on Saturday. Let's end with this. Day-to-day for quarterback Riley Leonard. If he does not play, Henry Beelan steps into that spot, I'm assuming. What do we need to know about Henry Beelan, as this would be his first collegiate start and stepping into a pretty tough spot here?
Henry can throw the ball through a brick wall. I think there's an old footballism or football quote where this guy can throw the ball through the brick wall. The problem is whether he hits the brick wall or not.
Sure.
It's not quite that. Like he doesn't have accuracy concerns to that level. He's just raw. He's a second-year kid. He was not an early enrollee, so everything is, based on where quarterbacks normally are. He's a little behind where quarterbacks that enroll in January usually are. But he's got talent. I mean, that arm we saw it. I think it was it the Northwestern game, I believe, where they brought him in to throw from the 50. He didn't get the throw off because he got sacked, but they brought him in to throw from midfield instead of Riley Leonard. It tells you that this guy has a stronger arm than Riley does. I'm gonna keep coming back to it though. He's raw. He's learning the position. He's done a lot of learning so far. He can run the offense. And that's where bringing him in against Lafayette when they did, it wasn't bring in the backup and have him hand the ball off 3 times. They had him run the offense, and he went 8 for 8 for 118 yards and a touchdown and ran for 1 too. So he's run the offense. It's one thing to do it against Lafayette when you have a 3 or 4 touchdown lead. It's another thing to do it against an ACC team, an in-state rival. But you're always going to get to this point and wish you had more time to prepare the backup. Like, that's going to be inevitable, that you wish you just had a little more time. You wish you had got him in one more blowout or one more chance.
Right.
That's natural, but they've done what they can to this point to get him ready. I can't stress enough how raw he is. He'll make some gorgeous throws that we've seen in practice, and then he'll miss a simple one. That's kind of that's what you sign up for when you play a second-year kid who is a little bit of a project when he comes in.
Buckle up,
yeah.
And we'll be ready for it all, I'm sure, and we'll see how that plays out. We'll follow the injury updates and that sort of thing. And again, Conor, of course, we'll be checking out DukeRALcom. As always, so great to see you. Love breaking down football. To your point, we got many more basketball conversations on the horizon too. Thanks for being here today, Conor.
Thanks, JJ.
That's Conor O'Neill, Devils Illustrated, DukeRALcom, joining us here on today's episode of Locked on Blue Devils. That's going to do it for our show here today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Again, check us out on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils, and listen to our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.